so we can forgive him for that. I'll translate things like I would say. But he's done tremendous work in Dallas area for years in education, advocacy in various ways, and has been most recently the ED for Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation in Dallas. I guess it's been 3 or 4 years.
4.5.
4.5 years? Okay. The time flies when you're in a pandemic. So.
Oh,
So they've been doing really transformational work in equity and those sorts of training in our region, but with the eye towards real cultural change and transformation. It's a unique vision and theory of change, and Jerry's done a tremendous job leading that. Many of you already know him from that, and I know I was looking forward to this like I am. So hand over to Jerry and to this panel, and I'm going to sit in the back and listen because I'm about to learn a lot of stuff.
Well, thank you all for being here with us. You're welcome to Self-Determination and Self-Preservation, Planning in Historic African American Communities. Again, my name is Jerry Hawkins. I'm the Executive Director of Dallas Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. Going to introduce the exciting panel I have here today. Amazing folks. We are missing one, but I'm sure Mr. Maples will come back sometime soon. He is walking around. But while we do that, I'm going to introduce the panelists, and then we will get started. To my direct left is Mr. Ken Smith. He is president of Revitalize South Dallas Coalition, a nonprofit that champions economic development, job creation, and workforce development in South Dallas, a historic yet low-income community immediately south of downtown Dallas. Thank you. Microphone, I can hear it. Ken is the owner of Holistic Investments, a small real estate investment company that acquires, renovates, leases, and manages residential properties in underserved communities. Ken and Revitalize South Dallas have been instrumental in expanding broadband and cell phone services in South Dallas, recruiting drivers and passengers for Uber South Dallas, and instrumental in developing other South Dallas things. I've worked with Mr. Ken Smith several times on South Dallas initiatives, and so happy to have Mr. Ken Smith with me. We also have Mr. Caleb Roberts, originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where his interest in community development and urban planning was fostered. He has a background in community organizing and economic development, working with a social justice nonprofit called MICA, where he advocated for better transit, housing, economic development in communities. He then moved to Texas and received his master's in urban planning from UT Austin. Until last year, Caleb worked as co-director of Northwest Texas for Texas Housers, an affordable housing and community development nonprofit, where he mainly worked on solidifying the rights of public housing residents and assisting Black and Hispanic neighborhoods with community development planning issues. He currently works for Gap Strategies as a senior planner, where he helps small to medium-sized cities create city plans. So thank you, Mr. Caleb. And then we also have Ms. Shawn Montgomery. Ms. Montgomery is from the 10th Street Historical District. She has worked directly with our friend Patricia Cox, Ms. Cox, on preserving one of the most intact freedmen's towns in the United States. The 10th Street Residential Association was founded in 2017 to preserve and protect the neighborhood in which they live, and has received national attention for their leadership and advocacy. Participated in several things in 10th Street where they're just asking the city to preserve and protect their neighborhood. In 2019, the 10th Street Historical District and the Residential Association sued the city of Dallas for disproportionate demolition of historic homes in their neighborhood compared to the white historical districts in Dallas. And then the 10th Street Residential Association worked with Inclusive Communities Project in 2020 to draft a neighborhood land use plan, and is advocating for the plan to be adopted as part of Forward Dallas. And we are waiting for Mr. Maples, and he'll be here soon. But he is a community leader who focuses on building strength in the community and promoting positive change through engagement, fostering volunteer opportunities, mentoring, advocacy, and a committed passion to serve others. He is a 50-year resident of the Elm Thicket North Park neighborhood and serves as president of the Neighborhood Association, and also as a DISD Racial Equity Board member, and a third-generation election judge and precinct chair for Dallas County. He's also honored to be a member of the United States Marine Corps, a proud graduate of Thomas Jefferson High School, and a board member representing District 2 on a Dallas Community Police Oversight Board. So, welcome to our great community panel. I am excited to talk about this topic because one of my biggest pet peeves is the way that we talk about our communities and our neighborhoods. If we know anything about history, and that's my first question to you all, we would look at the miracles and the miracle workers who have been working so hard to just preserve their neighborhoods despite compounding racist politics, compounding state, local, national even policies that are meant to be destroying to their communities. So I'll start with you, Mr. Ken Smith. Can you share a little bit about the history of South Dallas as a community, as it developed and changed? And who are the people who live there now?
Thank you for the question, and I'm so happy to be here this morning. Revitalize South Dallas Coalition began about 10 years ago with people who actually live in the South Dallas Fair Park area. And what we did was not try to think that we knew everything. Most times, and I would promote this, you would have a strategic plan and you set up your organization based upon your goals and objectives, blah, 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 blah. I preach that all the time. But we didn't do that. We said, let's get together and let's figure out what is our collective strength as people who live in South Dallas. And the first thing that we did, which is one of the things that I would like to promote, is be data driven. Know what you know. Even if you live in a community 68 years like I have, I tell everybody, I didn't really begin to know my community until last year when I started riding my bicycle with a high school classmate every other day. And what I saw on the ground on a bicycle was so different than what I saw in my car driving by, even if I'm driving by the same places every day. And the other thing that we decided we were going to do is act upon the data, not the perception of what we think the data may be or say. Let me give you one example, and I'm going to get you a question too. When we said, what is South Dallas? The first thing we had to do was define it for ourselves.
Yeah.
And if you live in Dallas, you know there could be a murder at Redbird Mall, and they will say South Dallas. And we know that from our perspective, we had to define our boundaries.
Yeah.
That's what we did. And that's 7521019. Then we looked at data and said, we have to make sure that we're seeing the right data. When we found out that only 30,000 people live in South Dallas Fair Park, and when I grew up there, there were 70,000 people living there. That's a aha, wake-up moment, right? When we say that we have 2 high schools, and those high schools are underpopulated, we also looked and found out that our dropout rate was 48%. This was shocking to us. So historically, we want to just make the point about Dallas. South Dallas originally was a low-income white area back in the 30s. And in the late 30s, early 40s, blacks began to move into the South Dallas Fair Park area. And we were met with bombs, literally bombs. My grandmother lived on a little street called Lawrence, and there was bombing all around. So that was our introduction into this new place. The other thing that I've learned recently, and I will be quiet, is we are surrounded in our geographic footprint by heavy industry. If you drive down Lamar Street, which is the western border of South Dallas before you go over the bridge to Oak Cliff. Everything from the river all the way down to this convention center is bounded by heavy industry. And that is the beginning of our awakening of environmental justice, our proximity to heavy industry. I'll stop right there.
No, thank you. Same, no, that's great, it was really great. Same question to you, Ms. Montgomery. Tell us a little bit about the history of 10th Street.
What part of the history?
We can start from the beginning.
Okay. Well, actually, I'm intrigued this morning. I didn't get his name, but he was speaking about Peterstown?
Peters College.
Peters Colony.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Comanche Indians.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 10th Street there were Indians there, but I thought it was Cherokee. So in 1839, there was, or a few years before 1839, there was this huge fight to remove the Indians from that neighborhood, which is 10th Street. William H. Hord was in the militia, and he is from Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
So he was given as, I guess, as an incentive, that area.
That's right.
In
Horace Ridge.
Hord's Ridge.
Mm-hmm.
It was named after him, William H. Hord. And so it became Hord's Ridge. So when he left, went back to Memphis, came back in 1845 with him, his wife, and children. And with him, he brought 3 slaves.
Mm-hmm.
Daddy Bum, Mamie Juliet, and a child. And that is how it began.
Mm-hmm.
And he was awarded 640 acres of that area
For free.
for removing,
Correct.
killing the Indian, part of the militia that killed and removed some of the Indians. So I said, they've been fighting for this land since almost the beginning of time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been that was probably in the 17th century, right around the 17th, 18th century when that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so that was in 1845, and then, after that, a few years later, we get this big group of migrants from the Freedmen's Bureau coming in from areas of Houston and Galveston,
Mm-hmm.
and that became what you are called now, what is called a freedmen's town,
Mm-hmm.
because it was one of the areas that the slaves could go to. So 10th Street was basically self-sustaining. These people came with nothing and built, I'd say, an empire.
Mm-hmm.
And that empire came up with several houses, all different types, shapes, and sizes of lots.
Mm-hmm.
Some of you are familiar with the term shotgun or shogun, I was advised. Haiti, they got that from the name from Haiti. Small houses, which are larger now. Now they call them tiny houses that they're building. But shotgun was considered a tall, one way in and one way out. That a lot of the African Americans lived in. From that, we're looking at businesses. Now, of course, there were grocery stores, of course, eventually, but there were businesses. Black and Clark Funeral Home, who some of you may be familiar with, who is located at Illinois in Overton, started in 10th Street in a house in 1910. Because we did not have, now we're next to a cemetery, but the Caucasians felt that we were going to be last burying our loved ones. So S.C. Black and I don't remember the other's name, but it's Clark as well. They spoke with a minister, and they were able to start the Black and Clark Funeral Home. There was also Moore's Bottling Company. Moore's Bottling Company is a soda shop. I don't know too many black men today who have their own bottling company that delivered and distributed soda. All of these things were on 10th Street. Now, where does 10th Street come from? I'll give you one more minute, and I know we have to go on. In going back to William H. Howard, he decided he would sell to T.L. Marsalis and another gentleman. They purchased it in 1890. So they defined 10th Street by in the area of Oak Cliff. Now, Oak Cliff, Mr. Marsalis said, because of the oak trees in the area and that beautiful rock, which is called cliff, that's how he came with the terminology of Oak Cliff. So that's how Oak Cliff is defined, which 10th Street lies on. He had a coachman by the name of Noah Penn, African American. He had Noah Penn replat the area and named that main street 10th Street Addition. And that's how 10th Street came about. So it's a lot more history, but I know we have to go on.
That's correct. Thank you. So, Mr. Maples, same question. Who lives in your neighborhood, and tell us a little bit about the history of Elm Thicket North Park and the geographical boundaries too.
Okay. So Elm Thicket North Park is Lover's Lane to the north, Mockingbird to the south, Lemon to the west, Inwood to the east. Stone throw from Highland Park. Our neighborhood came to be, so Carver's Court, Elm Thicket, sat down where we know now as Love Field Airport. And then it was an air base back then, military type air base. Deregulation came along, and if anybody knows about deregulation, airports, highways, it's not that same situation to where we offer you what you think your house is worth. It's more like, we're gonna give you what you think you deserve, and you gotta go. Because naturally you can't live on an airport. So when that neighborhood was dissolved, and that neighborhood actually encompassed Hilliard Golf Course, the first African-American golf course in the southern sector of America. The mayor of Dallas actually came out and, they did a dedication and all these things. Now, because of that, we moved east. Across now is what we know as Lemon Avenue. But there was only so far we could go east. So, we had Roper Street. So we had Elm Thicket, across Roper. We had the North Park area. Now, just like you said, our neighborhood was predominantly white. When we started to move into the white side of the neighborhood, there were bombings. They didn't want us there. So when white flight happened, and everyone started pushing to the suburbs and just left the neighborhood, well, African Americans moved into this neighborhood, and we did well. There were doctors, lawyers, teachers, and just professional African Americans that wanted to live north of the Trinity River. Elm Thicket is one of the historic black neighborhoods north of the Trinity. A lot of times when people talk about black history, they think about South Dallas or Oak Cliff. There's a lot of black history north of the Trinity, as you know, as you did the article with the Freedman Cemetery that's being taken care of by Cochran Chapel Church that sits at Bluffview or Midway and Northwest Highway. Now, Elm Thicket has prospered for years and years and years. And what's happening now is we're going through what I call a hostile takeover disguised as gentrification. And let me explain what I mean by that. What I mean is, I'm a Marine. I serve my country. I believe anybody should, well, let me just rephrase that. The American experiment says that you should be able to live anywhere in America you want, as long as you can afford it. Well, what we're finding out is this hostile takeover disguised as gentrification, we had to prove our name in history. We actually had to have our state representative, city council, set up a call with our new neighbors, to explain to them that this neighborhood is called Elm Thicket North Park, and this is our history. Now, again, you can live anywhere you want to live, but you just don't come in and say, okay, we're gonna live here now, we're gonna call this Preston Hollow Edition or Inwood Estates or whatever, and forget about Elm Thicket. Because they said it's derogatory to them. My history is derogatory to them. And be honest with you, that makes me absolutely angry. To tell me that my history didn't exist and we're gonna change everything about it and whitewash it. Well, over my dead body, literally. That's not an avenue we're gonna go down. So, we are constantly doing what we need to do to make sure that Elm Thicket is not like Uptown, which used to be known as a Thomas and Hall.
Right.
That's pretty much forgotten about. Those who are a certain age understand that when they started expanding Central Expressway, they never had ran across those freedmen's graves. They never would have had the dedication that sits right there at Lemon and 75. So, Africans, freedmen, when they came and migrated, and Thomas Hall area was where they went first, and there was a natural progression west. As you know, with the Freedmen Cemetery, it tells you that Africans were living here. So we're just working diligently to hold on to our history and make sure that we are not forgotten.
So Caleb, thank you, Mr. Maples. Caleb, I want to bring this to you, hearing some of the history of the communities that they have and setting us up for our next question. How are cities, you from Milwaukee, I'm from Chicago, so we've seen this before, particularly like deep racialized residential segregation. How have cities helped or hindered efforts to preserve and protect neighborhoods? And then I'll ask them that direct question to their own neighborhood.
Yeah, this is a loaded question, and just listening to everybody, Ken, we were talking about this before. I think as a planner, the hard thing that I've realized working for communities from a nonprofit space, working with cities now, is most African American communities are in conflict with the cities that they're placed in. The hard part about that is when you're in conflict with the city that you work in, a city department, a city staff, city council are making decisions for the whole, and you just seem like they treat your community kind of like a stain on what it's trying to do. Like, we're trying to go this way, and you all are pulling away from our main vision. So if you go to a city council meeting, you ask for something, another community would get it just because they organize. That's the only thing that you have to do is organize, and it will be given to you. But if you take an African American community, for example, we talked about heavy industry around. Why is there heavy industry around it? Industry in a planning sense is a nuisance. A nuisance is something, hey, if I walk outside, I don't want sawdust in my face. The same way anyone can say the same thing about race. I don't want to walk out of my house and see someone black. Now, we think these things are more quantitative than they are. You want to think there's some science behind it. No, it's feeling. If I don't want an industry next to me, the same way I don't want black people next to me. So that's why you see a lot of black communities near industry. They're both two things that nobody wants by their house, and affects their properties. Because I don't want it, because my feelings towards you are bad, it can affect your property value. So you couple these things with industry. So now you have a situation where, you know, black people, black communities are synonymous with industry. So wherever you want to go, move, we're going to treat you like you're a chemical factory coming in and wanting something. And so when you look at it that way, you really see that it's very hard to have self-determination, to work with the city when you're viewed as a nuisance to most of the rest of the city. And that's what I see. I worked in dozens of neighborhoods here in Texas, from Amarillo, Lubbock, Fort Worth, Houston, Galveston, Austin. It's the same thing. All the way up Midwest, Milwaukee, yeah, you know, just connections with black communities everywhere. And the problem is that not only are you not in step, there's some systematic disadvantages to being a black community and where you came from. So in 1920s, 1930s, when they did urban renewal, you're some 60 odd years out of slavery. The United States government looks at black housing in many different cities. There's a lot of cities that are complaining about how black houses look. Is it reasonable to think that black homes would look similar to white homes some 50 years out of slavery? You can ask yourself that question. That's not something that we need to go. Of course not. So when a city looks at it and goes, well, this is not up to our standard, your standard is always being compared to the people that oppressed you and got the resources from your work. So how am I supposed to build something that is on the level of my own comfort when I'm graded by your comfort? So those things in a planning sense are always going to make black communities be somewhat attacked. We're in capitalism. That's what's happening now to the community now. It's, hey, you're growing your community, you can be building businesses, but we can devalue you. First off, because you're black, like I said in the beginning, you're a nuisance, which means you're already devalued. We already aren't looking at your community, which means your grandma's house that could have been $200,000, $300,000 is $75,000. Not because of the structure, closeness to, you know, resources, just because of who she is.
What Mr. Roberts talking about wouldn't seem so shocking if there was not research to prove this. So just to give you a resource, the Brookings Institute put out a research brief called Devaluation of Black Neighborhoods and Assets. It's a really important thing to look at. You know, it talks about, you know, black neighborhoods being devalued by 50% of white neighborhoods. It's a really great asset. And then there's a project I worked on with D Magazine about Fair Park, about the destruction of black homes on the south side of Fair Park. So check out those things to see what he's talking about, particularly white communities coming to the State Fair saying they don't want to see poor black people living around Fair Park. So I want to bring this question to you, Mr. Smith. You know, how has the city helped or hindered the protection and preservation of South Dallas?
Going back to data. Back in 2014, our organization, Revitalize South Dallas, did a study of the studies. And we were about to embark upon another study of South Dallas Fair Park. And as the project manager, I said, let's stop. Let's not do another study. We hired BC Workshop to study all the previous studies, so we didn't have to do another one. Guess how many studies have been done for and about South Dallas? 167. Wow. We didn't want to be 168. We made up some t-shirts and said, not 168. What the city has done, and I don't want to be a negative criticizer of the city of Dallas. There are some really good people at the city of Dallas. It is unfortunate, however, that they have to work in such a bureaucratic system that whose goal it is to keep the fat Humpty Dumpty going, as opposed to getting down and figuring out how every dollar can reach the person or the project that it needs to do. in the city. I am a former city employee. All right, so I'm telling you, I used to work and report to the city manager back in 1980s. And I can tell you that the structure of the city is exactly the same. The policies are the same. The people have different names. The departments change names. The MO never changes. In spite of the good people that we're working with sometimes who we can connect to. So instead of being negative, we're saying we have to work with the city. They take care of the zoning and the planning and things like that. But the purpose of this whole conference today and this session is self-determination. What we have unfortunately been for a long time are victims of what others have done. And I want to turn that around to say, no, we're not victims anymore. We're going to be the leaders. We are closest to what's happening in our communities. We need to create whatever mechanisms there are to make sure that we are at the table when the table is being prepared. When the meal is being conceptualized, we need to be there. And too often with the city's processes, because it is so huge, it will put community engagement in the middle and at the end of some process, as opposed to when you're formulating the menu. And that is one of the things that I'd like to emphasize today. In your communities where you are, start right now, start in the beginning of the process. The city, for the first time in its history, has begun the budgeting process in March. Never, ever, ever has it ever done that until this year. Take your goals and objectives for your community, put a dollar value to what it is that you need, go to your council person right now, and make sure they put that dollar amount in their budget for your community. Don't wait till July, it's too late. They've already formulated the budget except for a few little extraneous things at the end.
Thank you. Ms. Montgomery, I participated in the National Trust for Historic Preservation's urgent call to put 10th Street District on its most 11 endangered places, historic places in the country a few years ago. So I know that there's now a national call to preserve and protect 10th Street. How has the city helped or hindered that process?
Wow. Well, let's see. Hinder. Let's do that. First of all, I guess, well, let me go to help. Maybe they help because we still have some structures. Because that's the purpose of being on the National Trust, is that we were intact, meaning out of all the freedmen towns in the nation, we still have structures. We still have structures that we're living in. We still have a church that we're able to worship in. We still have a school that, and I'm talking over 100+ years.
Right.
Everything over there is over 100+ years old, unless it's been newly built. So I guess they help that way. How they hinder is the same place that demolished over 200, and I believe 240 houses.
Most of the time without building them back, right?
Building them back, they haven't been built. There's none of them that have been built back. Out of all the 13 historic districts, when I say historic, I mean including the multiracial, now I can say multiracial, and white historic districts. Other than us, I do believe it's Wheatley Place. We are the historic district. The study that's been done, all our structures have been demolished. So, yes, they hindered. And when I look at other states, like Oklahoma, where these people are going just searching for remnants of their destruction.
Talking about Tulsa.
Tulsa.
Yeah,
And
Greenwood.
we have buildings right now that our ancestors came in and built.
Mhm.
Noah Penn, like I said, that he was a carpenter. He planted, but he was a carpenter. We still have those structures in our neighborhood. So, what are they doing to help? I don't know. 1950, you brought in 35. No, we had to have transportation, but you put it right in the middle of Upper Freedmanstown, and that tore down businesses in 10th Street. So we don't have the businesses anymore. So that's a hindrance. We do have Townview High School, which is one of the #1 high schools in the nation, but you tore down the structures for Townview, and we almost didn't get Townview. So it's one of those things. It's like really like this when you look at it as on a scale. But I have to be truthfully and speak. You have done nothing but hinder, and we could, at this point in 2022, 10th Street could be major with history.
Mhm.
You got people tourists going to Italy for old buildings
Yeah.
every year.
Yeah.
And you have a Freedman town. Not only just the town, the people, iconic people that came from that neighborhood, and you do nothing about it.
Yeah.
T-Bone Walker, blues artist. He worked with Duke Ellington, went to N.W. Harley. From 10th Street,
Mhm.
you did something for Kenny Ray Vaughan and his brothers.
Stevie Ray.
Stevie Ray Vaughan and his brothers.
Yeah,
Put
who
something-
learned from them.
Who learned from T-Bone Walker, but you haven't done anything in 10th Street regarding T-Bone Walker.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's it.
So as you said, Mr. Maples, I worked with Robert Wolanski to talk about this cemetery that is connected with the Garvin Memorial Cemetery, a Confederate cemetery in between Midway and Marsh on Northwest Highway.
That's correct.
And beneath that cemetery is an unmarked grave site that is connected to the neighborhood of Elm Dickon and North Park. Folks don't understand that you all have Juneteenth parades. You'll have a great new waters facility. You all have a very intact, one of the best elementary schools nearby, right? Like, how is the city helping or hindering the preservation and protection of that community?
Oh, that's my good man just said, that's a loaded question. But it was also said that you have to organize and raise hell. That being said, we're part of Peter's Colony as well, in Elm Thicket. Yes. And we are part of what most African American neighborhoods are, environmental racism. We breathe the air of Southwest Airlines every day. And before they built DFW, the airlines before it, we breathed that air. Not only did we breathe the air, when those airplanes landed and took off, they shook our houses. So that means there's structural damage to those houses.
Exactly.
Now, we are in a 5+ year zoning battle. 5 years zoning. It is absolutely ridiculous. Now, because I believe in asking or demanding what we need and, understanding politics, if we don't get what we want, I'm gonna organize to vote against you. And most politicians understand that because they don't want anybody making noise. Yesterday, I was downtown and I hope everyone in this room is paying attention to this. The redistricting, the maps, they are absolutely awful. They are absolutely awful. One map pretty much wants to write South Dallas away from Fair Park. And we know what's organizing that. One map decided that they wanted to cut Elm Thicket, North Park in half by splitting it right down the center of University, making half of it District 13, half of it District 2. District 13 encompasses Preston Hollow. A historically black neighborhood has nothing in common with Preston Hollow and points north. What will happen is we get lost in the shuffle of our voices, again, unless we raise in hell. So, I mean, it's a love-hate relationship. But I believe in organizing and raising our voices and just keep dripping on them till we're being heard.
Yeah. So Caleb, to set up this next question for our panelists, how is planning a tool to address some of these issues, and what do you think right now needs to happen to advocate for these communities, and how last part of that is, Forest Dallas can help attain some of those goals?
Yeah, I think planning is very important, but you can also have 167 plans and they not go anywhere. The main thing for communities is you need to have your own money and raise your own funds for plans. As someone who's worked in a nonprofit before, there's always, if you're paying a cost, or you're getting free work from some nonprofit, there's always a cost and you're paying it. If you're working with a nonprofit or somebody else is paying for your plan, they have ideas about what should go in that plan. Nobody gives anything for free. That's with planning or anything. Raise your own money so that that person who's working, that you hire to do your plan, has some deliverables that you want to see. It's hard to raise money, but that is as an organizer, soft money and hard money. Hard money is something you control more of. If you can raise $50,000, $60,000 and get that thing started, you can start talking about implementation, which is how most plans fail. Nobody actually talks about implementation. Goes out and finds and connects your plan to the funding that it needs. So a plan without any funding is just words on a piece of paper. Might as well be some poems. You read it and feel good. And so as what can happen next as a planner, what can planning help? It can help connect those dots for you, but also connect you to the funding and resources, which is, one of the premier parts of planning. How can you actually get this accomplished? And I think somebody who is getting paid by the community will just take that extra step to make sure the community is involved and make sure that plan goes somewhere because their name is attached to it. So that's something we can do, is always have those resources and pay out people to do the things for us and not accept people making plans for us because they have their other goals, which, like we talked about, may not be in line with your own communities.
Thank you. Mr. Ken, you have a great newsletter called Revitalize South Dallas. It goes out almost every week and shares resources with the community, so I know you're advocating. But how do you see planning as a tool to address these issues, and what are you all doing now to advocate for the community?
I'm going to use one example to answer your question. This is 2022. We found out about a plan in South Dallas Fair Park for the city to build 39 houses in an area called Jeffries Myers. If you're familiar with South Dallas, it's right next to the Juanita Craft Post Office. There's nothing but empty land practically on 3 streets, Jeffries, Merlin, and Myers. I think there are 7 structures. It used to be multifamily, just hundreds and hundreds of multifamily. And I remembered historically there was something wrong with that area, but I didn't know what it was. And I went and talked to Hank Lawson, who was the former head of South Fair CDC. And he gave me the history of this area, and I said, oh, I remember something. I called the city of Dallas. I tried to speak to my council person and the head of housing for 4 months just to speak. By the way, I'm on the land bank board, so you would think that I would have an inroads to just have a communication about this project. 4 months it took just to even get it. When we had the meeting with the councilman and the head of housing, they both said they had never received my emails. And I challenged them right then and there, go to your inbox on May 8th and read it. And there enough was my email. I said, May 12th, April this, whatever. They had received all of them, never read a single one.
Mhm.
The bottom line is, there is a industrial foundry that makes transmission vehicle parts that shares a fence line with the city, the lots that the city wants to have. Not a buffer, the exact same fence line with smokestacks on top, with the roar of blast furnaces going 12 hours a day. And I say, in 2022, you are intentionally trying to build homes next to an active foundry with smokestacks, noise pollution, air pollution, and you're happy about that? And the answer was, we wouldn't want to live here, but the pioneers will take care of it once they move in. I said, that's the problem. This is happening right now, today.
Wow.
So, we talk about mindset, and you would think, oh yeah, that happened way back when R.L. Thornton was the mayor and the head of the KKK at the same time. But no, this is happening today with the head of housing and the head of planning, who I've known who was there when I was at the city years ago, is no longer there. Not Julia, she's a wonderful person. Julia is a wonderful person. But the previous head literally was the bottlenecker for any and everything happening in South Dallas. So I don't want, again, I'm not trying to paint the city in a bad taste, but I am saying you have to be wise as serpents. You have to know that you're going in, and sometimes there are people who are going to be advocating like Evelyn and this group, and then there are other people who may be very nice who are sitting there blocking everything that you want done, policy-wise. So I'm not going to call this person's name who's sitting back here, but they know. So I hope I answered that question, but you have to work with your city, and your city is going to be a combination of good and bad. You've got to develop the muscle and the maturity to navigate what you want and have a clear picture. Vision is a clear picture of a desired future state. If you have a clear picture of what you want your community to be, nobody can go in there and diffuse your image of yourself. And that's what we have to have, along with starting our own money and creating relationships with Paul Quinn, SMU, UTA. Our universities are helping us with all of these processes. Thank God they are here.
And what Mr. Smith says is right. There's recent articles that just released about Dallas being one of the worst cities for air quality in Texas. And so that means that some new regulation is going to come from the government as far as air quality, particularly noise pollution as well. Ms. Montgomery, can you share about how planning for 10th Street is used as a tool to address some of the issues you've discussed, and also how you all are advocating for the community right now?
Yes, well, advocating, we came together around 2015, a lot of the community people, because we wanted to make sure that the history of 10th Street is not forgotten, and just tell people about it who didn't know, because several people would say, we didn't know. So how we got together to do our historical marker, and that's the marker you see me and Ms. Cox standing by. And that was placed at N.W. Harley. Originally, it was supposed to go on 10th Street at the corner, but we ran into a roadblock because we found out that the Southern Gateway was working on that area, And so we weren't able to have our marker placed there. But we got it placed in up in Harley, so that's okay.
Yeah, I'm on the Dallas County Historical Commission, and if ownership of the property is the biggest impediment to markers, so you're right about that.
So, making sure that everybody knows that. And then we've been advocating, getting with the city, the Landmark Commission of the city of Dallas, to help stop the demolitions in the neighborhood. That's one of the major things that we have been doing to try to preserve it, is to stop the demolitions. Now, the other thing we have been looking toward is the planning. So we, as of last year, we worked on our neighborhood plan. That is not the first plan, but that is a plan that we have been pushing to get the city to recognize and, you know, to work that way. The other thing we're looking into is trying to advocate to get more police protection in our neighborhood, because it's just, I don't know, it's like it's just killing everything that we're trying to do. People are trying to renovate houses that are vacant. They're buying that property now because it's going to be close to the new deck park. So, but as they work on it, you've got people that are living on the street, that are tearing it down as much as they can try and build it. But we have been successful, actually, in getting about 13 to 15 properties renovated. So that is, yeah, it's not a lot, but it is a start. It's a starting point. And just, you know, putting it out there about 10th Street and, you know, about our history, as I was saying.
Yeah, and after this next question, I want to open it up for questions out here. But Mr. Maples, we actually just approved the marker for Elm Thicket at the Dallas County Historical Commission, so congratulations.
Thank you.
In our last meeting. But I've been over there, I've seen what's happening. You know, how are you all using planning as a tool to address these issues, and what are you all doing to advocate right now?
Well, let me start off by saying great work, 10th Street. Both of my parents went to Harley.
Okay.
And they always spoke well of Harley before they married and moved north. And I don't think we've always organized. We always had a civic league. Ms. Walker was a part of that. As you know, Kamisha did excellent work in the writing of getting the marker moving forward. There are just lots of things that are important. You know, my father walked and marched downtown in the 60s. Stories would come home to us, you know, I got spat on, I got hit in the head with a bottle. So as I'm learning as I'm learning to deal with the world of politics, and as they say, Jonathan, you gotta learn to play the game. Man, this is not a game to me. When I'm talking about Elm Thicket North Park, it is not a game. This is an historic African-American neighborhood, and our story needs to be told forever, just like other stories. So that marker was just a part of it. Our Juneteenth, which will be our 12th annual Juneteenth celebration, the longest running free Juneteenth celebration in the city that brings between 700 and 1,000 people out throughout the whole day. Sponsored by 7-Eleven, Love Field Airport, just to name a couple. You know, we work with a lot of the businesses around us because it's important to make sure they're engaged to know what's going on in our neighborhood. Right. Because of where we actually are, it'd be easy to get gobbled up. As I said, to the east of us is Highland Park. I mean, I could literally take a golf ball with maybe my 5-iron and knock it all the way over into Highland Park. That's how close they are to us. So, you know, one of the things that we know is that our neighborhood has become, since the removal of the Wright Amendment, It's a hotbed. I mean, and everybody wants to be in that vicinity to the airport. I mean, everything in North Park is 15 minutes from anywhere else. You just go right down Mockingbird, get on tollway, boom, you can go. So we're trying to make sure that we hold on to all of our history. We want to make sure that we're engaged with anybody that's fighting for justice. Because at the end of the day, I truly feel if you stay engaged, justice will prevail. And it's unfortunate that the system is designed for us to fail. That's unfortunate. You're born black or brown, the system is designed to keep you down. One last story, and I'll shut up. My grandmother, who was born in 1909, would tell us, black and brown kids, don't challenge anything a white man says to you. I'm 56, I was born in 65, one of the first 5 babies born at Baylor Hospital. I don't have that type of fear. I have a passion of what I can afford, what I want, I want the opportunity to be able to have it. And I feel the same way for other people. If you want it, and I don't care what color you are, there should not be any boundaries holding you back. So, and I support anyone that's doing anything of that type. And I make sure that when I'm talking to state rep, senator, councilman, whoever, I want them to understand that we all deserve the right to live in a place that we love and respect. And we have a relationship because I believe in community policing. So I have a relationship with our community police officers, and every time we have an event, we invite the whole force to come out, and they do, and they support us, and they eat, and they'll bring their families from time to time, because honestly, if you have community policing, it lessens the opportunity that something tragic will happen, because in community policing, they usually know, oh, that's so-and-so. We just need to talk to him in a certain way. Or they'll call me and say, hey, Jonathan, we got a situation with a vagrant or someone. Can you come down and let us know who it is? And I'll come down and introduce him, because it takes away that shock of, hey, you need to go somewhere and move around. And it turns it into, hey, Chris, why don't you get your stuff? People are complaining, and go somewhere else. So, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of avenues we have to work in, but it's continuous.
Yes, sir. So are there any questions out here for our panelists? And if there are, please use the mic, step up. We'd love to hear from you. And while we're doing that, can we, you all share how we can support your work? We'll start with you, Mr. Ken, and Caleb. We want to support your work too as we talk about the neighborhoods.
Fight your property tax valuation. I know the family that lives on the corner of Mockingbird and Winnetka. And they can't afford to stay in the house after the parents die.
Isn't that ridiculous?
And it's a beautiful home. It was maybe $400,000 before the escalation of property values. But literally, where will that person be able to go?
Yeah.
I don't think people realize, I don't think the city realizes that that is a new form of gentrification. When, it was my house, for example.
It's not new.
Perfectly.
No.
My house was $38,000 in valuation in 2017. It was too low. I'll be the first to admit. But why did it go up to 105 in the next year? That was 169% valuation increase in 1 year. We fought and brought it back down to 80, which I thought was fair. Now it's 168. I can afford to pay it, and I will, but I'm going to fight it. But if we do not fight property valuation increases, we are going to have a new flood of mortgage people who are out of their homes, who have no place to go, because where is the $50,000 to $70,000 house that used to be a nice house just 3 years ago?
Nowhere.
It doesn't exist. So that's number one. Number two, I really like what Caleb said. Even if you just raise $10,000, I don't care what it is, own your neighborhoods by hook or crook. Own it. I own mine. I own 3 houses on my street. And so I'm the king. You come through my street, you come through me. Sometimes that's dangerous, sometimes it's not. On the next block, every house is rented. Therefore, the owner is somebody that lives in China, literally, Africa, literally, and all states. What can they do on the next block as tenants? They can call Northwest Legal Aid and help with an issue, but they don't own it. And if we don't own our communities, we are not going to be able to do anything to help our communities succeed.
All right. Ms. Montgomery,
Well,
how can we support you in your work?
definitely by rail, through the rail planning, because they have been instrumental in helping 10th Street with the, as I was saying, with our planning, also with the preservation efforts that we're doing, because that's a part of the zoning. We want to keep our neighborhood. We want to, we know there's so many vacant lots. We know development is happening, but we want to make sure it's development that is affordable and also that looks like the neighborhood, not these huge humongous structures that is going to increase our properties. My great-grandmother, who recently passed a few months ago, lived to be 109, and she was in that house when she moved up from Tyler in 1950. So there are other people. I came back in the neighborhood as a caregiver to care for her, because me and my mother felt like, why should she have to go? Why should she have to be in a nursing home? It's her house. This is where she's happy. And so we took care of her. There are other residents just like that. They're not 109, but they are in their 80s. They're in their 90s. They want to stay in their house. But with the property taxes due to, we have a deck park that's on its way. Those, and the new Southern Gateway that's redoing 35, as our council member said, and you have a $1 million skyline. All of those things are increasing our property values. So a lot of the older people in the neighborhood, they have that, we don't want those people to go out, but we're getting an influx of homeless people too. They're just coming in our neighborhood as well. So just, if it means sending a letter to the council person, what can we do to help preserve 10th Street? Keep those property taxes, at a certain amount so that we're not priced out of our homes, and definitely help us to keep our structures and not tear them down or demolish them.
Mr. Maples, how can we support?
Well, you guys always support us because I ask. I don't sit around and wait for the fire to start. I always try to make sure that on the front end, that if help is going to be needed, especially research and data, I make sure that I reach out. But as it's been said, taxes are it's not the new, it's another form of gentrification. Let me just say, houses, after white flight happened in Elm Thick and North Park, African Americans were able to buy their houses from anywhere from $12,000 to $19,000, $20,000. Last week we got our appraisal for our home. It's $800,000+. Simply because of what's going on in our neighborhood. We got a builder, kid by the name of Olario, went to SMU, decided he was gonna sell hydroponic weed, got busted, went to federal pen for dope and money laundering, got out of prison, got his realtor's license, and he's the #1 gentrifier north of the Trinity River. I wouldn't be able to sell a doghouse if I went to the federal pen for doing anything. 3 months ago, he bought a whole city block in our neighborhood of rental properties and is tearing them down and bringing them back with the townhome duplex. Toplet's property is on the next street over. One of the biggest slumlords, drug house owners in the state of Texas. You got him in 10th Street and GW Works. So, we got and now they caught on, let's put everybody out of the houses they've been renting for years, and they gotta go find somewhere else to live. Let's tear down that house or duplex and come back with another duplex that sells for $1.2 million both sides. So you're talking $2.4 million for 40 houses on the street, each side. So, I don't have a problem asking. I mean, ultimately, we'll all have to work together. This coalition and no decision made for us without us is true. It is absolutely true, because we're going to have to bounce ideas off of each other, and we're going to sometimes have to bull rush our council people and our state representatives and everybody in between and say, hey, look what we're going through, because unfortunately, Dallas does not have a plan to protect middle income and lower income people. And we're quickly approaching looking like San Francisco, where all the rich people live in the city and everybody else lives out in the suburbs and has to fight for any type of home ownership. Because as you said, affordable housing now starts at about $250,000. We had a neighborhood meeting, and one of the new residents in our neighborhood said, well, all this makes sense and it's fine and dandy. However, middle income people now are $800,000 a year more. I'm like, what fantasy do you live in? You're one of those people that come down Inwood, turn into the neighborhood, pull up in their driveway, close their garage behind them. So, yeah, just don't forget Elm in North Park, and know that it's a constant battle. Every day something new.
Caleb, so to close us out, what can we do to support the preservation of historic African American communities?
Yeah, I think they've said a lot of things, and I think the main thing is just understanding that you have the power to do some of these things, and that you want to own it. You, like was said before, you want to own the means of what you're trying to do, and I think the main thing is organizing. I come from an organizing base, so I'm always going to go back to organizing, making demands, creating your own money. These are things that are going to protect you in the long run, and not to rely too much on these systems that say they're going to help, because there's a lot of things that you don't understand about. And so always rely on the people and the people around you first. And even if it's a small amount, I think we always think that you need millions of dollars to do major things. $500 to $1,000 to $2,000 that you raise, that you move in a certain way, can really promote the right kind of things. And I could go on if you want to talk after, but just those kind of things as an organizer really starts and gets the ball rolling and can get control of the community. And I think when that happens, you'll see a lot of things are in your control, and the people that are making moves around you that not necessarily have the best interest at heart.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. My name is Ben Stewart. I represent a company called Stantec, which is a large global engineering firm. And we have a robust brownfield group. I'm an environmental scientist and a planner, and I work with our brownfield group, and we come alongside like 100 different communities nationwide, and we help them write brownfield grants and then implement those brownfield grants. And for those people that may be unfamiliar with it, the EPA brownfield program goes into a community and says, okay, you've got X brownfields. And brownfields are not just what you may think of in terms of a big industrial plant that's polluting the air or polluting the noise. A brownfield could be any building, any historic building that has lead, asbestos, mold in it. And what the brownfield program does is it establishes grants that can be awarded to not just cities, but also nonprofit groups to go in and do assessment of these properties, all the environmental work that needs to be done to get them ready to be redeveloped. So I'm very proud to work with this group, and I'm just here to listen and learn, because we wrote the EPA Brownfield grant for the city of Dallas, the one that they're currently implementing. But all the things that you said about the city and bureaucracy and those things, and I 100% agree. So we want to kind of break down those barriers and just want to hear, my question for you is, where do you think brownfield funding could be better utilized than it currently is? And the reason this is so important is because right now the brownfield program is like $65 million a year nationally. It's about to be $1.3 billion after the bipartisan infrastructure law. So we're looking hard at that, and we want to come in and help communities more than what we are right now.
Well, I'm not an expert, but I was on a call with Felicia Allen and Mr. Gadek.
Yes.
The other day,
Oh, yeah.
dealing with that, and the city of Dallas received $600,000 in a brownfield grant in this latest wave of applications. And at this point, there are about 84 properties that have been approved by this community, by this group committee, to move ahead to the next phase. And we're already seeing some phase 2 developments in the South Dallas Fair Park area. We also heard from Felicia that that amount was going to go up to 1.2 or 1.3 billion. But we also had on this phone call the TCEQ, the state entity. So local, state, federal, working together. Then we have, I'm not going to use names, then we were able to get a nonprofit to add $100,000 to the pot. Can you believe the city refused the money?
Wow.
Think about that. Why would you refuse a gift for brownfield or whatever? It's very interesting. And that working together, working with the universities, and I commend SMU and Paul Quinn especially, for helping build the larger pool and also helping get the commonality of the different people who are involved and engaged in the process. We can find the funds. The funding is perhaps, for environmental stuff, is perhaps the easiest thing to do because there is a process. It's the political will that is the most difficult thing to do, because the city will tell you, oh, we have our latest, racial plan or whatever. And I started laughing and I said, show me your implementation. First, show me your plan. Show me your implementation. And I said, Ford Dallas was created in 2006. It was supposed to be updated in 2012. When did it get updated? It's in the process now. What happened to the 2012? There was no driver. There was no person in charge. And the person who headed planning at that time just was forced to retire last year. But this person had it in his authority to bottleneck the program, and he did.
Wow. Wow. No, I have a question. Your company, is it only structures that you work with?
No.
Okay, because, and the reason I ask is because living in the shadow of Love Field Airport for decades, and I wonder about a soil study, because we had a resident who lived in our neighborhood. She just passed away recently, but she had 5 boys when she moved here from Thailand, and she moved to West Dallas in the shadow of the lead smelter. She said she had her kitchen sink would leak. And so she would send them to go get some of that dirt over by the, lead smelter. And they would put in this dirt to, to catch the water in a house in the 60s. Every one of those boys died of cancer. So I'm just curious as to, I'll give you my contact information, and maybe we can talk offline, because if it's not just structures, there may be something we need a little help with.
Oh yeah, I mean, environmental impacts start with soil and groundwater, so,
Okay.
and any assessment that we do involves soil, groundwater, air, the lead, asbestos, mold, all that stuff, yeah.
Okay.
So, first of all, I want to thank all of the panelists for being here. In closing, you know, there's a big harsh reality. Unless we deal with the legacy of removal of Native people off of this land and the legacies of slavery, we're going to still have inequities and discriminatory policies on our communities of color. But that leaves us an opportunity, and that is to fight. I want to just name some resources like the Neighborhood Self-Defense Project, Dallas TRHT, DallasTRHT.org. We have tons of learning resources that you all can check out. Please visit the communities that we're talking about. Go visit 10th Street and see how beautiful the community is and what folks have done over decades to preserve it. Visit South Dallas. I mean, one of the most historic places in our city. Visit Elm Thicket. Still, one of the best contained neighborhoods, and folks are really fighting for their communities. So thank you all for being here, and please get their contact information and support the work that they're doing. All right.
During the panelists, a round of applause. I want to thank them for being flexible. We had to move rooms, and that's why they're like on the floor, and like, it's sort of cafe energy that we have here, which I really appreciate you guys being flexible for. We're going to move this section